Okay, great. So today we have Della coming to us to speak to our attendees of Craft Cash Summit. And she has a shop called Della Madonna Rosaries. I've got it right here up on the screen. She hand makes heirloom quality rosaries. And so we're going to talk to her about her growth and a little bit of her backstory and, of course, some tips and tricks and that kind of thing. So Della, thanks for speaking with us today.
Oh, thanks, Frank. It's good to be here.
Great, great. So, really quickly, for those who may not know who you are, tell us a little bit about. I mean, I know a little bit of the story, but tell us how you got started. First of all, making rosaries, and second of all, what was the point where you decided to actually monetize these?
Okay, well, as a kid, my mom was really active in our church, and she had us making rosaries by the bagful for those mission rosaries with the plastic beads. And I mean, we probably did that for a couple of years, and shipping them off. And I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, when Mother Teresa was going to be coronated as a saint, I thought I really would like to try and make something in respect to that, and so and to honor that. So I did, but I had to kind of work up to it because I didn't know what I was doing. So I made them completely differently now than I did back, as a kid. And so the materials are all different and stuff. So I just started making things, not that particular one, not the Mother Teresa one. And eventually I got to the point that I felt comfortable with what I was doing. I made the Mother Teresa rosary. But by that time now, I had so many pieces that I had made. And like one person doesn't need as much stuff as I had. So I'm like, I need to start. I took some of the original ones apart because they weren't very good, and then remade a few of them. But still I had so many that I decided to open up an Etsy shop. And I've known people who've had Etsy shops and sold on there before. So that was about 3 years ago when I first opened it. So I've had 2 holiday seasons on Etsy. The first one, I was complete rookie, did not know anything except, it's not hard to go in and actually set up the shop, but how to make it work, I didn't really know anything. Last year, I was pretty happy with how I did for where I was at in the process. And my goal for this year was to double my sales from last year, which I've done. And I still feel like there's a lot to learn, but I really do enjoy it. It takes a lot of stress away. So I have a day job. I'm a corporate tax accountant, senior manager at a public accounting firm, and it's stressful. It was pretty stressful where I was working 3 or 4 years ago, so I just couldn't sleep at night. I was always thinking about projects for work. That also was an impetus into me getting into this because it settled me down at night. Like, you have to actually pay attention to what you're doing. Otherwise, it gets off, the counts are off or whatever whenever you're making it, like you would be for any handcrafted item. So it kind of settled me down so I could relax at night.
Yeah, I would say that tax accounting would settle me down. It would be the inverse.
I don't sleep with a coat under my book. I'm not that person.
Yeah, yeah. So that's interesting. So your backstory is you learned how to do this with your mom when you were young. When you were what, 8 or 9 or?
Right. Yeah, that's about the time, those couple years there, when she was doing that. And
Okay.
we had my sister and brother. No, my brother, not really too much, but my sister and I were cranking them out.
Wow. So you know how to do this. You have an emotional attachment to this product.
Right.
And so I want to talk about that too, because there's religious significance to this for you,
Right.
and I assume for the buyers. I mean, I don't know, I mean, are there, I guess the only people who are buying these are Catholic, correct? I mean, they're buying it
Yeah,
for,
I mean that's kind of the niche that it's in, right?
yeah,
Uh,
perfect.
so you see that, and it's for people. Really, there are people that are looking for something that they can't find anywhere else, and that true.
Okay.
That happens with most of the things that we find on Etsy these days. We can't find them in the store down the street or whatever. We're looking for something special and unique. A lot of times they're for gifts. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's a self gift, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think those are common themes that we find on Etsy. So it's not just something that applies in as a Catholic gift in my shop. That is kind of across the board that you see, but my niche has been in that space for the Catholic rosaries, and my connection to it really is that feeling, doing this with my family as growing up. And then really just now what I find really fascinating is when I'm looking at the medals, there's so much imagery in the detail of them that like I never really would have paid attention before, but you get in there and because you're working with them all the time, you actually see. So I actually do like looking at that and doing the research around them, finding out more history about different designs and stuff like that are out there, because there's a lot more out there than just the traditional like 5 decade Catholic rosary.
Sure. No, that makes sense. So, and I want to come back to this right here in just a second. But okay, so just so I understand the story arc here, you started when you were a little girl. You have you're presumably Catholic.
Right.
Well, I guess your mom is certainly.
She sure
um, that we've established. Um, this is familiar territory for me because I grew up Catholic, and these items, for those of you listening, for the attendees listening in Craft Cash Summit, who aren't from a religious family or who aren't Catholic, this rosaries are, well, how do you they are more than just a talisman. They're more than just a symbol of a belief. They also have a functional, a utilitarian function, which is sort of kind of like meditation, I guess. I mean, Catholics have a form of meditation and prayer,
right.
and this item facilitates that. And so, kind of like Buddhists have prayer beads, and the beads track the number of prayers. It's so the beads on rosaries, set amount of in this case white beads broken up by the blue beads,
Mm-hmm.
and those indicate different prayers that you're supposed to say, and
Right.
and so yeah. So anyway, I just want to explain that because we may have listeners from India or the Pacific Rim,
Right,
or
absolutely. And I find it really interesting because, part of like just looking at the different designs that are out there in the Catholic rosaries, if you look into most religions will have some sort of beaded meditation tool out there. The Buddhists have malas. And the Hindu use that too. There's a Muslim version. So it's really something that's, I think, pretty widely, but I have found like one or two faiths that are like major religious branches that don't, but it's very common to have that. So just try
yeah.
to,
So I didn't know that the Muslims had something comparable, but
yeah,
it would make
it's got fewer beads, but yeah.
that would make perfect sense.
Yeah.
So because, and I wanted to talk about that, that I wanted the listeners to understand that piece of it, so they understand this piece of it. Okay. because one of the reasons I was excited about having you come speak to our attendees is because one of the things I see, one of the mistakes I see so many crafters and artists make is they don't charge enough for their work, number one, and they don't have premiums. They don't sell a premium version of what they do. So it would be like a painter, paints. I'm thinking of a specific artist who came to me. I teach a pricing class,
Mm-hmm.
and he took my pricing class and said, here's a picture of my painting. What should I charge for it? And I said, what are you charging now? And he said, 300. And I said, that looks like you made the frame as well. And he said, I made the frame. I said, dude, the frame by itself is worth 300. I said, you need to charge way more than 300.
That's not easy to do.
Yeah, exactly. And he said, well, what should I charge? And I said, $1,500. The first thought was 3,000, but I didn't think he could go there mentally. If he's taking someone from 300 to 3,000, they usually put you in the you're crazy category. So I thought 1,500, I'll split the difference. So I told him 1,500, and I said, I prefaced it with, but I don't think you're going to take this advice, because very few people ever do with my pricing advice. And, this guy was young, ex-military, had a chip on his shoulder. He said, I'm going to prove you wrong. I said, okay, great. Prove me wrong. It's just going to mean you make more money. So 2 weeks later, I get an email from the guy saying, I just sold my first painting for $1,500.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Yeah. So the point is, I think the artist, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but the artist gets stuck in a pricing bias they themselves have about their art, because they know how to do it. And they think it's simple because for them, they've done it some number of iterations. And so for them, it is simple, but for the buyers, it's not simple. Just like putting a rosary together. I mean, if you put me on an island and forced me to stay there until I could produce one of these, and you gave me all the right things to produce one of these, after 2 or 3 weeks, I might be able to do something this nice, maybe, but I don't have that kind of time, right? So if I have someone who is, we'll talk about events in a second, but the event is a lot of times the trigger for these purchases,
Mm-hmm.
for this particular purchase. You're in a very unique position where, and we'll talk about that in a second, but the event triggers this purchase. And so a Catholic event triggers this purchase. Someone wants an heirloom quality. They go to Etsy, they see yours. They don't have 3 weeks to learn how to do this. They work a full-time job. They've got 3 kids. They see that for $165 and it's done. And a lot of times the artist will say, no one's ever going to pay me that much for it. But clearly people are paying you that much for it. You have 112 sales. So talk to us a little bit about what actually triggers this purchase.
Usually it's a sacrament type of a purchase. So we've got a baby being baptized or first communions. So like in the March, April, May timeframe, most of my sales are in that first communion type of client. They have, it's a lot of times it's a godparent buying that for the child that's making that sacrament. But then throughout the year we have baptisms, and sometimes it's there for weddings. This particular one that you're showing right now, I've sold quite a bit as a groom's gift from the bride. And sometimes we change a medal or something that they want. There's a really pretty wedding one out there that we'll switch into. And if I see that it's going to be for something like that, I'll usually ask because sometimes you can see what your customer is looking at and what else they favorited, right, on Etsy. So if they're doing a lot of wedding stuff, sometimes I'll ask them if that's what it's for, because maybe they want that instead. So
I see.
So yeah, I mean, usually it's kind of focused around those 3 things: baptisms, weddings, and first communions. And then sometimes it's like a gift for a grandparent or something like that.
I see. So, okay, so let's talk a little, now that we've talked about the items themselves, and these are what, handmade and on some kind of a string. Just explain to us kind of what we're looking at here, just to for
Yeah,
people.
so yeah, they're handmade. They're either going to be hand knotted on silk, and sometimes we do them on a jewelry wire where it's not knotted. So hand knotting is like pearl knotting, you know, the traditional way that you'd see a string of pearls. It's knotted throughout on silk. But if we know it's going to be something that's going to have to take a lot of wear and tear, like for a little boy, sometimes we will wire it because I have boys. So
You know.
I know how that goes. So yeah, so I do them both ways, either on the wire or on the silk, and they're used mostly I use the hand cast bronze metals. Now, I don't make those metals, I purchase those metals, and then use bronze findings, the little bead caps or the little space beads and stuff in between. Those are the findings to match. Sometimes we get people that are looking for it in sterling silver instead, so they can be done in sterling silver as well, but the price point's a little higher for that, so a lot of people would just prefer the bronze. And the bronze has a real old world kind of a look to it.
Yeah, I mean, the detail on this is incredible. So are
And then
most of, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say the beads are just natural gemstone beads.
Yeah, they're gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can tell the detail. There's a tremendous amount of detail going on between these beads. And so are most of your buyers people who are buying what they see, like they just say, click to order 165, I'm done, I'm going to get this shipped in the mail? Or do they contact you for custom work? What is your...
Probably 25% turn into a custom order.
Okay.
They'll come in and they'll say, you know, I really like this, but can you help me find a metal that is more meaningful in a certain way? Or maybe they want to do the whole thing in sterling. And sometimes they have an idea in mind that's completely separate and apart from anything that I have in my shop right now. I sometimes get reached out to just for something that they have in mind, which actually can be a lot of fun. And I've had some of those turn into items that I carry on a regular basis.
Oh, interesting.
There's a lot more back and forth with the customer to do those, and then, you know, get them preliminary photos and stuff. So, you know, for their approval and all that. And then maybe change it up. Maybe, you know, maybe keep it the way we got it and then go on from there.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And so, okay, cool. So I want to just kind of talk about a little bit. We'll get into more tips and tricks section later on. But how? So you said recently you doubled your sales. Talk to us about what your sales were like before, the experience of selling before, and then what it was like post doubling your sales.
So last year for 2018 was the first full year that I had on Etsy. And I was just trying to get to break even, and I probably almost did, but I didn't have a lot of sales, probably about 35 sales altogether last year. So I was probably in about the $7,000 range. And it takes a while to learn the system because there's so much to learn whenever you're setting up a shop. And so my goal for this year was to double it. And I have doubled it so far already this year, so I know I'll make it for the year. So I'm just trying to keep building on the knowledge that I have and finding the time to implement it. Little tweaks and things that I could be happy to sit here and do this all day, but still have that day job.
Right. So I was going to say, you know, for you as an accountant, setting a financial goal, you can hit it one of two ways, right? You can either hit the goal with sales, or you can just change the numbers on the spreadsheet, right? I mean, that's so it's sort of perfect, right? But you legitimately
doesn't change the number in the bank account, though.
I know, right? Exactly. That's what I tell people. Yeah, it's not the number of sales you have; it's the number of dollars that you have left in your account.
Right. Yeah,
because
for sure.
when you go to the store, when you go to the store and you buy gas and groceries, and you tell them how many sales you have on Etsy, they say, "That's fantastic, but do you have any dollars?" It's funny how that works.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So, what did you mean by 1,000? You said 7,000. You almost broke even. What does that mean?
7,000 was my gross sales for 2018.
Oh, okay.
So, and so this year I've doubled that, a little bit more than that. And so I had put, like at the beginning of the year, I just kind of put down some numbers of what I thought I could do every month, and I've been able to meet or exceed all of those months so far this year. So I will have a profit this year, and so I'm happy with that, and I'll probably have to pay taxes on it. But my goal is to get to a point that this will grow enough and would be, at some point, whenever I really want to retire from working on a regular basis in public accounting, that I would have this built up by that point.
Okay.
And so I am taking my time in learning how to do it, and finesse, and and like, I have enough time. I guess it's spread out enough for me that I have just enough time to implement something, but then I see how it works before I'm really into the next thing, because I'm not depending on it per se.
Sure. I think that's an interesting piece. That's a great piece of advice, which is, if you're struggling to make ends meet, approaching a business like this where you can grow it the right way, as opposed to doing it fast and loose just to make sure you have gas and groceries at the end of the week. Those are two completely different experiences in business.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that can't be done, because I mean, it just depends on, like, how viral the idea is, maybe, or how wanted that piece of artwork is, type thing, or an artwork style. So that can be the case, that can make it work. But
yeah.
Like, I'll go, okay, I need to fix this, I need to change something, and it takes time for me to get in there and get it all changed all the way through my product line, and then get that implemented, and then be on to the next thing. So, but I'd probably spend, in addition to work, in the evenings and on the weekends, probably about 25 hours a week.
Oh, okay. So so we'll talk. I want to revisit that that concept of planning ahead, then executing that financial plan, and then monitoring, debriefing that process, because I know that's your formal training, and I think that you probably have some good.
I love numbers.
Right, I think you have some good stuff to teach us. So, but we'll get into that in the tips and tricks section. But what I want to do is, so just go make sure I understand the narrative, which is you started selling. Why did you start selling a few years ago? What was? I mean, was it
just because I had so many items that I made for myself, and I'm like, I don't need all of these items. Like, I really just wanted my one. And I finally taught myself how to do it, but then I had all of these, and.
But why not give them away? I mean, what was your decision? Because obviously I know you give some of your profits away. You give 10% of your profits away
for charity. I do, yeah. And then I also donate pieces, like for charity auctions too. So. What actually? So my question then was, for someone like you with your
with your experience and your mindset, what was it that you said, I've got a bunch of these things. I could either give them away or I could just, put them on Etsy and see how it goes. Have you ever been in business before this venture?
No.
Okay. So what was the,
I really like the creative aspect, and I don't get that at all in my day job because we don't want to say we're creative accountants, right? That's not a good thing. So,
right.
yeah, that gets you in trouble. But I really like the creative aspect of it. And I think I thought, well, maybe I can just do something with it. I do, family members give them, so it's like, people do gift it to them, but I just really enjoy making them. So I needed an outlet to have them go on their way. And I really do enjoy now, like you get to, meet your customers through, at least through like Etsy combos, but talking to them as well and hearing what they're interested in. So finding out why it's meaningful to other people.
Right. No, that's a good point. So what is this item here?
That's Our Lady of Mercy, and it's got a lily cross on it. It's made with tanzanite, which is really pretty. I think that picture could be better, but it's not. And with lapis in the middle and little tiny sapphires. So, yeah, and I just thought that metal is gorgeous. I really like that metal.
So, so you have rosaries, and then you have. Is this a rosary, or
it's a 1 decade rosary, or sometimes they're called tenors, or they're called a chaplet.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with them, and I was raised Catholic, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so talking, Della, let's kind of talk about you doubled your you set a goal and you doubled, and then so now your trajectory is, that's what you get when you say SAT words, right? You get tongue tied. Your trajectory is, that's about as esoteric as it gets. Your current trajectory is, okay, I started, had an experiment. I put my things on Etsy. It did well. I revisited the sales and came up with some ideas of how to double that. You did double it. And then now in the future, it's about, okay, my next step then is to generate enough revenue where I can do this full time. Is that fair?
Probably, I would say maybe full time in about 5 or so years. That would be nice. I think it would probably take about that long to be able to do it in this particular thing, because you have to look at the net revenue that you're making, not the gross, right? Right. So I think it would probably take about that long to do it. But in the meantime, it's still, it's still positive now. And so I feel good about where it's going, and after accounting for my time. So that's good.
Okay. So let's talk about that. When you say accounting for your time, what does that mean?
Uh-oh.
No, not numbers. I don't. You don't have to tell us numbers.
At least minimum wage is what I'm saying, Frank.
I mean, because that's so funny. When I ask an accountant, you think I want a specific number. No, what I want is explain to everyone what you meant by that, because I think I think way too many artists, they don't look at their time as a piece of the equation.
Well, the time to make a rosary is probably about 3, after I've got the design figured out, because I'm not counting the time it takes to design it. That I usually have several iterations before I'm satisfied with something, and then I'll make multiple of them. But once I have the design figured out, it's probably about a 3-hour process, 3.5-hour process to make one. So for sure, when I say I'm going to be positive for this year, I'm counting that time. Maybe I don't know if I'm counting the design time or all of it, or all of like the website work and stuff like that. That takes longer.
Mm-hmm.
And this picture you're looking at right now, so, and we can talk about it whenever you want, but like one of the things that I had to like get going was photography. I used this stone background on all my photos initially, and decided I needed to change it up, but I haven't switched out the pictures for this one. Yikes.
No, I think it's beautiful. I think that I think the photography is great. I mean, unless you're trying to get a congruent background for all your items or something, I think it's a great background.
It's whenever you put blue and a couple other colors on it, it picks up differently. So I ended up switching it out to something different.
So, going back to going back to figuring out, hey, what am I actually really making here, right? So we have what we call top line revenue, which is gross. Some people call it top line, some people call it gross. It just means how many total dollars hit your Etsy account. So let's just use some cowboy math here. Let's call it $1,000. Okay.
Right.
That doesn't mean we get to spend $1,000 at the grocery store. It means we made $1,000, and then from there we subtract, Etsy fees, transactional fees. We subtract our cost of goods sold, which is our material, right? The stone and the string and all that. Then we subtract our time, but our time for this unit itself, right? Not the time that we have where we built a new website or, DM'd a few people on Instagram or whatever. That time doesn't get included, or it does? How?
Well, ultimately it should be included, because this really, it is time that you're spending in your business. But I guess what I would say is, I don't know if I would say I would break even this year counting all of that time. But I think that additional time, especially in website designing or are things that are going to help grow the business going forward. So they're like investments of time. So
how do we think about that, though? I think it's super interesting that
I think over time, I still want to be able to recoup it, but it's probably a longer timeline to recoup that time, to be paid for that time.
But is that something? I mean, some people, now I know some people are not as anal as maybe an accountant would be in tracking and even thinking about that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean, let's just say fastidious, maybe is a better word. But at the end of the day, those are activities that let's just take building websites and updating a separate site. And you have a separate site that you're currently working on, right. This site here. So you have an Etsy shop here that we've been looking at, and then you have this site here that you're working on.
Yeah. There's a lot more behind the scenes on that you don't see.
Right. Yeah.
That's all the people can see, though.
Sure. So, but this piece here, the putting up a website, that doesn't necessarily have to be done by the artist, right? That's something that we can, outsource and pay for and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so what's interesting also to me that I want to make a point here, if it's not too obvious, is you have 112 sales on items ranging, and I think your average looks like about $120 average, maybe around there, and that's without an accounting background. And so you have all that, and you've been in business 3 years. Two Christmases. This will be your third Christmas.
Right.
And your external website looks like this. So my point is, you don't have to have 1,500 different things to make money on Etsy. If you're watching this, in Craft Cash Summit, and you're wondering, you're hearing about all the different things from different speakers, like, I do this on my Instagram, I do that on my Facebook. This is an example of, you don't have to get bogged down in all those things. You don't have to have 1,500 plates spinning. You can just literally focus on one platform for a while. Now, nobody in the right mind would recommend staying there forever, right? Because there's too much risk in staying on one platform. But in the beginning, just to get some initial sales, and I don't know it depends on what you sell, I guess. You may not want to wait till you get 112, or you may need 500. It just depends on what you're selling. But my point is, you don't have to have 500 plates spinning to be profitable, to make the kind of numbers that Della is talking about, because Etsy makes it so simple, and in my opinion, super dirt cheap. I still think they're dirt cheap.
And that's the thing of it. The really great thing that, if we pay Etsy their 8% or whatever,
yeah,
to sell there for the transaction cost. And I do promoted listings on there too, so I pay for that. But
yeah.
For me, that's the best investment in advertising too, because people are already here and they're shopping for the thing. They put that in the search. So now there's already customers, they brought them to me. And while we have to figure out SEO within Etsy, as I venture out into that other website, I know, then I have to also understand Google SEO.
Sure.
So
and you already have
the next chapter.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you already have an Instagram, you have Pinterest. It looks like you're driving traffic to your website from your Pinterest, and then your Instagram, you're driving to your Etsy shop. Is that right?
Right. Yeah,
Okay,
they go to the Etsy shop right now, and
yeah.
and the Instagram one's still really early on. I think that one's actually mapped to the website. So, and then the website has a click-through. I think it should still be there, hopefully, to go to the Etsy shop. No, it came off.
But you got a lead capture.
I just changed this page, and the click-through to go to the Etsy shop is not on the page.
Welcome to my world.
That tonight before I go to work.
Yeah, welcome to owning your own website. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff you have to worry about or think about. But that's part of the nice thing for those of you listening who are not super technically savvy. The nice thing about Etsy is everything's provided, right? It's you put your listing, you can only put it in one place. There are only 10 carousel. There's only one place you can write a description. There's only one place you can write the title. You pick your tags and you're kind of done, right? Yeah. I mean, and the other thing I want to mention too is I read a lot of chatter online about Etsy fees, and I've run a lot of different businesses over the years, and if someone brings me business, let's say for a piece of real estate or for something I'm transacting, even a service, even a consulting service, and said, I'm going to bring all the customers you want, but I'm going to charge you 50 cents on the dollar, I would say, great, knock it out. I'd sign up for that all day long. To have to pay 10 cents on the dollar, that's like dirt.
Better deal.
That is dirt cheap. When I look at that from a business perspective, and I know, the numbers are the numbers, but really at that point, it's like, if 10% is gouging you, then you may want to look at your margin.
And the pricing, your pricing is maybe not where it needs to be,
Yeah. So no, I think that's even better advice.
I'm not frustrated with what I'm paying to Etsy. So I'm okay with that. But I think that there's other people that I could reach that don't use Etsy, or and then it gives you kind of additional kind of social proof, I guess, if you have it on your own website as well. So But I'm not frustrated with it, including the promoted listings that I do. But it's learning how to do all that stuff, and how much are you willing to spend, because the promoted listings is optional. You don't have to do that.
So I want to ask you about that too, and we'll get into the promoted listings in our tips and tricks section. But I just want to point out to everyone listening that Della is a licensed CPA, a senior CPA at a firm, and she's saying she doesn't mind the fees. So just for the record, just for the record, this is a numbers person. If the fees are gonna bother anybody on the planet, it's gonna be Della, and she's not bothered by the fees. So
yeah, when you think of it as a percentage, I'm not. I think it's relevant because the traffic is there, the customer is there. So
yeah, I think that's, and I think your advice is fantastic. Of, if that 10% does bother you, if the fees do bother you, then you probably need to revisit your pricing. And that's the first place I would look, is in a normal business, in an offline business. I would probably, I'm more biased to look at expenses first. In other words, like a real estate company, for example, if someone says we don't have enough margins, I'm apt to go in and look at the cost structure first and then the pricing. But with art, it's the inverse for me. When I talk to people and they say, I'm spending X amount of hours and I'm just not making it work, my first question is, have you raised your price? Have you looked at your prices, your top line, retail pricing? And they always say no. And then this is the wrong time to get into the weeds on this, but there's a lot more to pricing than just what you're asking. There's a whole constellation of pricing considerations that determine what your conversion rate is. And that's all I'll say. I have some training.
I probably could use some guidance around that too. I mean, I haven't thought as much about that part of it as other things. So.
Sure. I'll put some training in the. I've got some training in my course around pricing, specifically in Etsy Cash Machine, which is my flagship course.
Okay.
But I may do some other stuff, or maybe you and I could get together again and talk about some specific pricing models in a subsequent interview. So
that'd be good.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting, because talking to a numbers person is a much different experience than talking to someone who's not comfortable with the numbers. And the thing is, I wasn't comfortable with the numbers when I first started business. Everything for me was ready, fire, aim. When I was younger, when I started my first business 35 years ago or 30 years ago. But if you're going to stay in business, you need some comfort with the numbers. I mean, you don't have to be Della. You don't have to go to bed at night worrying about whether the book's balanced for her client or not. But you have to understand numbers on some level. Would you not agree?
Yeah, I think you have to understand on some level. And for some people, and I've had a lot of different clients. I've worked in industry outside of public accounting, like in company tax departments and stuff. And what I understand is, like, there's the entrepreneurial mindset, and in the personality perspective, they're opposite ends from the tax person.
Right.
Usually. So, but you need that entrepreneurial mindset to get something like that off the ground. So, so for me, in a way, this is a little bit more of a stretch. I've always had like an art kind of a gravitational pull, but I like numbers too. So, but still, there's a lot of trying to force to put myself out there and understand how certain things work, or or like on the social media part to me is really challenging because I am an introvert, like most
Sure.
tax people.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So on that note, let's get into some of the specifics on how you doubled your sales, because I think that's a fascinating story. What I want to do is get into the weeds and get into some of the details on
Hmm.
what were what were some of the levers you pulled.
And I did, yeah.
uh, what were some of the moves that you made to make, because I think that that if we can learn from you some of those things, and we can affect that in our uh, in our in our shops. So I guess let me start with